in the glittering world of the Gilded Age, marriage was the ultimate prize for an elite woman. It was a transaction sealed with a diamond, a merger of fortunes designed to climb the slippery rungs of high society. But for a few daring women, the real prize wasn't a lavish wedding, but a scandalous divorce. While HBO's The Gilded Age gives us a peek into this drama, the real stories of the women who defied society were even more shocking. Today, we'll explore how Gilded Age wives didn't just escape their marriages, they burned the rulebook, faced social ruin, and in doing so, changed everything. To really get why a Gilded Age divorce was such a bombshell, you have to understand the gilded cage of marriage. For the elite women of late 19th century New York, a wedding wasn't a love story, it was a business negotiation. Her value was her father's fortune and her family's name. His was the status he could provide. Love was a luxury, and usually an irrelevant one. A dominant force in this world was Mrs. Caroline Astor, whose ballroom and exclusive 400 list was a powerful arbiter of social acceptance. This list, curated by her confidant Ward McAllister, supposedly represented the only 400 people who truly mattered in New York's fashionable society. To be on the list was to be accepted, to be left off was social doom. Divorce was seen as a moral failure and a surefire way to risk being cast out, as it was a public admission that your perfect life was a lie. Divorced women could become pariahs, shunned from the very world that defined them. The HBO series dramatises this fear through the character of Aurora Fane, a divorcee who, despite being the wronged party, is initially treated as a social leper and a walking symbol of the shame associated with a failed marriage. However, for men, the stigma of divorce wasn't always a life sentence of social annihilation. John Jacob Astor IV, Caroline Astor's own son, managed to divorce in 1909, remarry a teenager, and remain in society. For women, social ruin was only half the battle. The legal system was also a prison. In New York, from 1787 all the way to 1967, there was only one legal ground for an absolute divorce: adultery. A woman couldn't leave her husband for cruelty, drunkenness, or abandonment. She had to prove, in court, that he'd been unfaithful. This meant filing a complaint, gathering evidence, and enduring a public trial where intimate betrayals were aired to a scandal-hungry press. The proceedings could be lengthy and humiliating. And here's the kicker. The guilty party was legally forbidden from remarrying in New York. It was a system designed to keep the institution of marriage and the fortunes tied to it firmly intact. For a woman to even think about divorce, she had to be willing to lose almost everything. Even if a woman successfully proved her case, the overwhelming social stigma meant many couldn't stay in the city. Only the wealthiest could hope to remain in New York and weather the storm. Then, in 1895, one woman decided to light a match and set that world on fire. Alva Vanderbilt. She's the real-life inspiration for the ambitious Bertha Russell we see in HBO's The Gilded Age. But Alva was arguably even more formidable. She had married William K. Vanderbilt, grandson of the famous Cornelius Vanderbilt, and she clawed the new money Vanderbilts to the top of New York society. But behind the marble walls of their mansions, their marriage was a wreck. William was notoriously unfaithful. For years, Alva did what was expected. She tolerated it. But Alva wasn't like other wives. She would later boast, "I was the first society woman to ask for a divorce. They had been wanting divorce all the time, but they had not dared to do it until I showed them the way." Now, she wasn't technically the first. Elite divorces had happened before, but her case was a public declaration of war that scandalized the nation. The newspapers feasted on the details. Friends and lawyers warned her she was committing social suicide. But Alva had a plan. She didn't just want a divorce, she wanted to win. And she did. In March 1895, she was granted her divorce. She received a massive financial settlement of around $10 million, including an annual allowance of $100,000, worth around $380 million in today's money, and she kept her grand houses. Perhaps most shockingly, she retained custody of her 3 children, a near impossible victory when children were legally considered the father's property. Alva Vanderbilt hadn't just escaped her gilded cage. She walked away with the keys to the palace. But could she survive the fallout? Alva knew that even with her fortune, she was in a shaky position. As a divorcee, she was tainted in the world she'd fought to conquer. But Alva, ever the strategist, had an ace up her sleeve, her 17-year-old daughter, Consuelo Vanderbilt. Just 8 months after her own divorce, Alva orchestrated one of the biggest marriage deals of the era. She forced Consuelo to marry Charles Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke of Marlborough. This was the ultimate Gilded Age transaction, new American money for an old British title. The Duke needed Consuelo's massive dowry to save his ancestral home, Blenheim Palace, and Alva needed the Duke's title to save herself. By becoming the mother-in-law of a duchess, Alva could reclaim her social standing. The price of this strategy was her daughter's happiness. Consuelo was in love with an American and was heartbroken. The story goes that Alva locked her in her room until she agreed to the marriage, which was so loveless that the bride reportedly wept at the altar. The arrangement worked for Alva, who soon remarried and was eventually reaccepted into society, but it created a legacy of misery. Consuelo's own marriage would end in separation and, decades later, divorce, a long shadow cast by her mother's ruthless ambition. Alva Vanderbilt's victory was stunning, but it was the victory of a woman with a massive war chest and nerves of steel. For other women, escaping a New York marriage was nearly impossible. So, they became fugitives from their own lives. This led to the rise of the migratory divorce. Women fled New York's tough divorce laws for states with more lenient ones. While nearby places like Rhode Island offered broader grounds for divorce, like cruelty or abandonment, the real havens were out west. Places like Sioux Falls, South Dakota, became famous as divorce colonies, offering freedom with residency requirements as short as 90 days. For a society woman, this journey was a form of exile. It meant leaving her home, friends, and the world that defined her, a quiet surrender compared to Alva's public triumph. Law firms even popped up in New York specializing in these out-of-state divorces. This option revealed a stark truth. For most women, freedom wasn't won in a New York courtroom. It was found in secret, far from home. While HBO's The Gilded Age depicts the social scandal of divorce, the reality for elite women was often a far more brutal legal battle with even higher personal stakes. It was a world of rigid laws, social excommunication, and heartbreaking choices. Women like Alva Vanderbilt, for all her faults, were revolutionaries. She took a system designed to control her and blew it apart. Her scandalous divorce, splashed across every newspaper, showed that a woman could not only leave her husband, but could do so on her own terms, emerging not destroyed, but empowered. She, and the other women who dared to seek divorce, whether through a public fight or a quiet escape, chipped away at the foundations of a patriarchal society. They proved that marriage didn't have to be a life sentence. Their defiant acts were not just about personal liberation, they were the first crucial steps towards the freedoms women expect and demand today. If you found this look into the hidden histories of the Gilded Age fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos where we untangle history from Hollywood.